Hi, everyone.
Hi, I'm Kathy from HR.com. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome to day 4 of Inspire, and welcome back to those that have rejoined us. Have a look around and tune in to the valuable learning sessions and networking times. Check out the event navigation guide to get the most out of the event. The presentation slides for today will be available in the webcast auditorium for download. If you have any questions during the webcast, simply add them in the Q&A box on your webinar controls. There will be time for live answers at the end. You will also notice the chat feature, which you may use to engage with attendees and panelists. We love hearing your comments. This session is Remoteability, the essential post-pandemic HR metric, presented by Tim Peffers. Tim is a strategic workforce planning and people analytics thought leader and practitioner, covering a wide range of topics and roles, including talent analytics, employee listening, forecasting, organizational health, and HR tech implementation. Tim is a data evangelist who is passionate about using data for good and making work more efficient, effective, and fulfilling for everyone. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Tim.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webcast today. I'm coming to you from London, in the UK, so looking forward to a weekend, and I hope everyone's had a really good symposium so far. I will be talking about remoteability, this new pandemic HR metric. But first, really talking a little bit more around what's happened in the pandemic and how we can use data analytics to really understand the workplace and potentially how we can manage our workforce more efficiently and more ethically going forward. But before we get into that, I just want to give a little background about myself. So I've been working strategic workforce planning and people analytics for about a decade now, seen a whole load of fads and different ideas coming into the HR space, some good, some bad, and I felt that maybe I should start sharing a little bit more around my experience, my knowledge, and having a little bit of fun. So recently, during the pandemic, I started my own YouTube vlog around people analytics, strategic workforce planning. It's called Random Walks in HR, and if I go through some of the topics I'm talking about today, especially around skill and task inference and then some of the modeling topics, then please do check it out, because there's some more stuff around there, and eventually I'll probably be uploading this presentation to that as well. So if there's anything that you feel like you want to come back to, or please do check it out. I'm not going to say like and subscribe, because otherwise I think people are thinking of having a midlife crisis, but would love to interact with you. So please find me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And obviously during the course of the presentation, please do put questions in the chat so I can respond to them. I have a habit of being a little bit technical, so if there's anything you're not understanding or want to go deeper, please do ask questions along the way. We've got a really nice time slot of 50 minutes, so we can get a lot of knowledge in there. But also, if you have questions or you want me to clarify anything, or you want to dive deep into a subject, please do. So, pandemic, how's it been going so far? Well, it's been very eventful for me personally. In June, we welcomed, my wife and I welcomed our son, Oscar, into the world. And my work sent a whole load of baby sleep suits that had data ninja and data scientists and training, and even a book around Bayesian probability. So I realized pretty quickly I needed to maybe share some of my personal life with my work colleagues. They just thought I was a data scientist. On that note, I did think, right, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to learn a new skill. So I got a data science laptop. There's a piece of work that I've wanted to do for a while now, a vocational piece about image recognition. I did not do that. That laptop has most been used by Beyonce, my cat, as a heat pad. And also by Oscar to watch videos when mummy's not feeling so well, and he needs to come into the office and help me and sit in some meetings. One thing I have learned during the pandemic is how to barbecue. So we're not quite at the standard of US barbecuers yet, but I've been learning to smoke brisket and big things. And actually, the vaccine rollout has been going quite well in the UK. So on Monday, we had a bank holiday and we welcomed 8 of our friends around the house, and were able to barbecue them and have a really nice house party, which was really wonderful. But apart from that, it's pretty much just been sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in now, sometimes sharing it with Beyonce or Logan, my 2 cats, and working in this kind of home office that now is almost feeling a little more like home. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is this new office, this new kind of digital workplace. Obviously, previously, this is where I used to sit, my lovely screens in London, overlooking St. Paul's Cathedral, this kind of very physical place. You buzz in the morning, you buzz out in the evening, and if you want to, you can leave work at home. And essentially now we're working in this kind of metaphysical workplace, this digital workplace, where essentially the rooms are all apps, and we communicate, we share, we meet, everything we do is online through these different tools. And I love this idea that we have in data engineering is around these invisible walls. And I think an invisible essentially within a database, or sometimes we'll say with a computer game, there's certain walls, certain places you can't do. You can't go from this data set to that data set because there's invisible walls that you can't see, but it stops you doing that. And I think one of the things that we've definitely seen in our employees struggle with is that when people who are used to working in an office and having that kind of separation between work and home, now they're working from home, these invisible walls are harder to see. And actually this kind of line between workplace and home is being kind of blurred. And it's very difficult sometimes people to shut off, or very difficult to segment and compartmentalize work. So it's not all doom and gloom, though. What I'd like to really talk about today is how people analytics, there's different tools and different ways that we can help the situation, at least understand what's going on. And I think one of the good things about this new digital workplace is that digital workplaces have digital footprints, right? So this is a very simple example. You can go into your Outlook and just pull out through a CSV file. If you just kind of go into click a few buttons, you can actually pull out all the metadata from your Outlook. So every time you accept a meeting, decline a meeting, send an email, receive an email, get an out of office, your system actually has a little line and a little log file that says this happened. And this goes for any computer system. So we're going to talk about a few different examples, but here's just an example of how we can use the email metadata to understand, okay, who are you meeting with? Who are you talking to? What are potentially you talking about? If we include the subject in there, we never look at the contents of the email. You know, what kind of interaction is it? Are you having a team meeting, like number one? Or actually, is it something more like a one-to-one, like number six? Is it me and my manager, or a small group of people having a one-to-one conversation? You know, is it important? Is it sensitive? And when we start bringing in things like the date and time of the email being sent or the meeting happening, we can also start to piece together, okay, how long are people working? What kind of working hours are people working? And what are the working patterns where people are communicating, collaborating, and doing work? This is a technique called organization network analysis, and it's really been kind of booming within the people analytics space. And it's become incredibly useful for companies who are able to do this during the pandemic, because what we're seeing is that actually people's work patterns are changing significantly. So I've thrown up some research that Microsoft have been doing, especially using their workplace analytics tool. But other tools are available. Other people have been doing research. But what essentially Microsoft are seeing is a few different things. One is around this kind of digital collaboration. So huge amount of normal collaboration and communication has been going online through digital channels since the pandemic, which is not that surprising. But I mean, if you think about the number of meetings that they're seeing has gone up by almost 150%. So people's number of meetings is roughly 2.5 times what it was pre-pandemic. You're talking about an extra 40 billion emails within one company. Huge amount of chat, and also the number of documents being accessed increasing by 2/3. So huge amount of collaboration online, and especially those meetings, those 2.5 times more meetings, really pushing working hours up a lot more. So the average working day before pandemic was roughly 8 hours. Especially in senior leadership roles, that's been pushed up to an average of 10 hours in certain organizations and certain roles. So you're seeing people having to work a lot longer, you know, the kind of 5-minute chat by the water cooler, or just jumping in office, or just sitting next to your manager at work, having that quick chat is turned to half-an-hour meetings, or people are communicating, collaborating, and meeting a lot more because they're worried about disconnection, because they're not having that physical interaction in the office. Whether that's they feel they need to communicate during the pandemic, or whether there's a lack of trust, that's where we need to go a little bit deeper. What is interesting about the Microsoft research is the type of communication. So yes, we're meeting a lot more, but actually what we're seeing is that teams are meeting a lot more within their local their local team. So these kind of what we call close networks, people that we work to very frequently or in the similar team, working on very similar projects, we're meeting a lot more, and it's very much more intense and much quicker communication, replying to emails and so on. So the communication is intensified, but only in small teams. That kind of wider networks, the more distant networks, that's actually gone down. So we're talking less with people outside our team. We're really collaborating internally. So really what we're seeing when we look at the email metadata, the meeting data, is that yes, collaboration and communication has increased, but it's really around silo working. It's these small, tight teams. And that's putting a whole lot more pressure and influence on managers. Okay, so if you think in an office, there'll be lots of other different stakeholders I'll be meeting, talking to, and they're going to be kind of influencing, sort of what's being communicated to me, what's happening, sort of where the work is coming from, where the prioritization is coming from. What Microsoft's research is sort of showing that actually now the manager, because everyone's working these tight silos, the manager becomes a much more influential and focal point, which means if we have bad managers who are not doing, sort of regular one-to-ones, especially scheduled one-to-ones rather than ad hoc conversations, that actually, if managers are having poor leadership behaviors, then that's increasing, stress on things like, mental health. That's decreasing the amount of communication. That's really having a huge impact on engagement. And I guess that's the last visual as we going to go round in an anti-clockwise way, is that actually connectivity within employees, at least in this research, is dropping quite significantly. So employees are feeling less connected to senior leadership, to other teams, to the company in general, and we're all becoming a little bit more siloed and a little bit more distance. However, it's not all doom and gloom. What we're also seeing is actually a huge amount of productivity, especially for employees who actually thrive remote working, right? It's interesting when you do these kind of researches around, new offices and making them all collaborative spaces and, all open plan desks and stuff. Generally, it is very good if you want to improve collaboration and communication, but actually there's certain roles that actively don't want that. If you're a developer or a data scientist, or you're a writer and you really need to focus in and concentrate on your work, having people all around you be able to talk and walk up to you and just be like, hey, can you, or, do you want a coffee, actually is counterproductive. So what we're seeing is actually over the pandemic, a lot of companies, especially tech companies, digital companies, they're reporting and they're seeing a whole huge increase in productivity, but is that productivity a good thing? Is that because people are working a lot longer, or is it actually because they're taking the opportunity to work from home and actually reducing those distractions? So this is where external research kind of hits a bit of a brick wall, and that's where the kind of internal analysis needs to start. And for us at PMI, one of the things that we're always very conscious of when we talk about O&A as a business goes, well, that's real cute, but what does it mean? How can I improve this? How can I take action on this? So I think we've done a decent job of talking to the business and trying to understand, right, well, what are the business decisions that you need to make as we're coming out of the pandemic? How are we going to work? What are we going to do? Are we going to do remote working? Are we all going to go back to the office? Are we going to go to this hybrid? Is it people going to have the choice? And essentially the business questions that we were told we need to get answer to is, look, as a relational organization, as an organization that's highly collaborative and relies on different people that are all working together and collaborating and innovating, we think we're going to need to have that close human contact. But how much, with who, when, and why should you go to the office are key questions. So just to mix it up, so I'm not talking about O&A, we designed a different experiment, again, using that passive digital data that we have in the modern workplace. So one of our markets, one of our countries, eased lockdown, so people are allowed to come back to the office, but they weren't forced to. And essentially, what we did, we used the passive data that whenever people buzzed into the office and buzzed out, we looked at exactly, who was coming in, how often they were coming in, but also were they coming in the same day as their manager, and were they coming in the same day as their teammates? And the idea was, let's answer these questions about how often should you come in, why should you come in? Should you come in and do face-to-face interactions with your manager? Should you come in and should we mandate team days so that we get that kind of cohesion within the team and communicate? And actually, is there any evidence to support this? And what we found was quite interesting, really. The first thing was around, we were just looking at Enps scores and looking at engagement. And what we found is that people who were not visiting the office or infrequently, and infrequently is less than once a week, were having negative ENPS. So definitely very poor engagement, and also we're seeing the same thing. We looked at results for sort of leadership and other attributes within the survey was quite poor. And actually, we were finding quite a nice sort of sweet spot was around the 3-4 days a week to come in. Again, vary by role, but quite a strong trend towards actually for us at PMI, actually going into the office was very beneficial and highly correlated to engagement and the NPS. When we saw line manager contact, again, people were not having face-to-face contact with their line manager who were in the office at the same time. Again, negative ENPS. And then as we kind of started having 1, 2, 3 interactions, we saw a significant improvement within the NPS. Another interesting thing is once you've gone past 3 days where you're having contact with your manager, we're actually seeing some diminishing returns. Now, this isn't, we're not proving causality here, but there is some implication that actually, maybe people are, if there's micromanagement or there's too much communication, people are able to focus. So again, there's that kind of sweet spot for us in this situation, kind of that 3 times a week. I think the most interesting one was when we looked at, okay, are people coming in on the same day as their teammates? And actually very poor engagement for anyone who is not seeing the majority of the team when they came in. So this really kind of enabled us to have a better understanding in terms of what should we advise people to do? We're advising people they should be coming in at least once a week for our organization. We're advising people to come in on the same day as a manager, but also their teammates. They can have that human interaction. They can have those conversations. They can do whatever they need to do within their teams, because we're seeing this as highly correlated to engagement, and as our hypothesis is kind of highly correlated to belonging. I'm seeing some really good questions around how can we track this data to use analysts to benefit organizations. Yeah, I think definitely before we do any of this, whether it's O&A, whether it's using building access requirements, we always go through a very rigorous process around, okay, is it legal to use this data? Is it ethical to use this data? We do a balance of interest around, well, okay, what is the benefit to the company versus the employee? And we really think about, and I think this was very easy to kind of to get agreement on, is that we're really trying, if we're looking at this from a lens of engagement, looking at a lens of other dimensions within our employee surveys around, mental health, well-being, psychological well-being, development, then actually we're really thinking about this advice, this data is really to improve engagement and belonging and mental health. So we really want to make sure that all the analysis we're doing is here to benefit the employees, rather than necessarily looking at this from just a pure productivity or sales point of view from the company. Is really trying to make sure that the analysis we're doing, there is a trade-off, and that yes, we will be using data that could be potentially sensitive, but we're using the right data. We can't get this data any other way, and actually the outcomes are going to be, in our minds, a benefit to the employee. So this is really us looking around, what are the potential risks and opportunities in terms of hybrid working? What is too much? What is too little? But as I keep on saying, it's going to differ from role to role. And this is where we start kind of getting into remoteability. So I don't think we can really just say, look, this role needs to be done remotely, this role needs to be done in the office. It's actually a lot more complex than that. What we need to do is look at the tasks, right? So this is just an extract from our task taxonomy for a data science manager, which I fall into. But essentially, these are the different tasks that the employee in this role, and we kind of do it on a quite wide aggregated role basis, and approximately how many hours per week we would expect that person to do these tasks. Everyone's task falls into roughly a dozen so different tasks. It may vary depending on the role, but we have a generic task taxonomy across all roles across the organization. Once we understand what tasks people are doing, then we can really understand, well, actually, when is that task best done? Is that done remotely, at work, at home, away from distractions, or is that best done face-to-face, communicating with that individual? And then we can build out, okay, what is the optimum working pattern for a different role? How we do this, essentially, there's a few different ways. If you're in a small organization, it's probably worth just putting in an Excel spreadsheet, sending it out, people can fill it in, and then we can calculate it just using Excel. I don't think this is a tool that we need to use for a company of 500 employees, especially if you have quite generic roles that are very similar, like say a call center. For a company like Philip Morris, what we don't want to be doing is asking 70,000 employees to fill in how much time they spend on each task all the time, especially as the role changes over the years. So we can employ something called skill or task inference. And essentially, again, thinking about the digital workplace, thinking about all the data that's available to us, there is a ton of data just sitting within HR systems that essentially says exactly what you're doing. I joined Philip Morris 18 months ago. So there was a job advert that is in our ATS system saying, this is the job that this person is due. Within our HR system, there's a job description that I signed that says exactly what I do. I have 2 sets of objectives. I have a performance review for my first year. I have development plans, also talking about the things I need to do and learn. So if you think about an employee in my situation, there's probably almost 10,000 words describing literally everything that I do, and especially around objectives, especially around development plans, is being constantly updated by myself around exactly what I'm doing. We've just gone through reprioritization, so I've got rid of some objectives, got some new ones in. So if you can harness that data, you can then look at the keywords that are in different tasks, analyzing data to improve operations. There's going to be a whole load of different keywords, whether it's Alteryx, Power BI, Excel, Python, all these different tools that's going to give the algorithm, the natural language processing algorithm, to understand, well, okay, this guy does analysis. This guy's kind of involved, okay, Python and R, and then this is kind of, okay, data sciencey, and then he's going to be doing this. But then I also have direct reports. So it's, I'll have objectives around Enps, leadership, scores, one-to-ones, coaching, mentoring. So then we see all those keywords, then we understand, okay, well, he's probably doing a little bit of, we then add in other data, passive data that's in the systems. Like we know how many direct reports I have. It's in the HR system. We know what grade I am, so we know kind of what level of kind of management and leadership and planning and budgeting that I'll be able to do. So you can quickly build up, with the help of a bit of data scientists, tools that's going to sort of automatically understand roughly what everyone in the organization is going to do. So there's a lot of talk at the moment within HR around skills inference, doing the same thing, understanding what skills we have and looking through those keywords and saying, yes, this person has data science skills or project management skills. But we can do the same thing using that passive data to understand tasks. And once we've understood task and it's constantly updating, we can then start doing this remoteability analysis. And essentially, remoteability is looking at those tasks, understanding from our task taxonomy which were best done remotely, which are best done in person, but also looking at a slightly different angle and looking at that risk. So how much human interactivity? So this is where the O&A research and the research we've done at PMI gets us to really understand, okay, I can manage my team remotely, okay? However, there is going to be a risk associated to that. Is a risk around, sort of engagement. There's a risk around, and we're definitely seeing this in our survey data around kind of management and careers and opportunities. If people are kind of working remotely, they don't have that manager interaction. They're not kind of feeling so connected to the organization. So yes, we can have remote teams and we can only see each other, once a month or once every few months, but there's a risk associated to that. And I think when we start using this remoteability lens, it starts unlocking a whole load of other possibilities. But also, we can understand if we're using either building ourselves using a little bit of data science and natural language processing, or there are third parties who can help do this. We've worked with Fathom AI, which is an Australian company that specializes in the future of the workforce and technology, but there are other suppliers available. EQ8 also has a remote working index that does the same thing, looking generically at roles, breaking down the kind of tasks, and then understanding what is the risk of having these done remotely, what is the opportunity, and what's the increased productivity that we can get by having these done remotely. And I think for me, yes, we can do this at a small scale, but if we then look at doing this using AI, using people analytics, or using a third party, we can then understand the whole picture across the organization. And this just unlocks a whole load of different opportunities in terms of, moving employees from one role to another, understanding where we can hire, what we can hire, and also looking at how we move, if we're driving up demand in one country, we can use resources that are working remotely in different locations to then backfill those. So I'm just seeing a question as well. ENPS, great question. Employer Net Promoter Score. So traditionally, employee surveys, we talk about engagement. There's a sort of usually there's a index of questions. I'm not planning on leaving the organization. This company makes me want to go the extra mile, and so on. There's kind of these different indexes. ENPS is basically a employee net promoter score that's only one question, like you would with a product, and essentially we understand how many of our employees are promoters, how many are passives, and then how many are detractors. But going back to Remoteability, the chart here is I have to fake up the data a little bit, but kind of understand the layer and actually which of the roles need to be done in-house and which ones could be done remotely, but also what is the risk, okay? And the last thing is also just making sure that when we use these kind of analytics, these are really just to help the organization understand a sort of baseline to make decisions, right? So I've included myself, very small dot. Yes, 100% of my work could be done remotely. And actually, roughly 20% of my time, according to our analysis, should be spent, coaching, having human interactions with my team, but also key stakeholders. But for me personally, I believe that actually sort of a lot of the stakeholder management I do should be done in person or needs to be done face to face. So you build up those relationships. So for me, I think I could probably do one day at the office, but it's a personal choice whether I do 2 or 3. But it's useful information to really understand, for me, where people should start making those decisions. And when we start doing those analyses around, what is the impact of going to the office, we're breaking down these employee groups into which are the ones that are most suited for remote working. And if we're forcing them back to the office 1 or 2 or 3, or even some companies 5 days a week, what's the impact? Those might be the roles that we are most at risk to lose, because there'll be other organizations saying, well, actually our data scientists and our IT engineers and our content writers for marketing could be going remotely. At the same time, if people do want to make a personal choice and love working from home, but they are in a highly interactive role, like say HR specialist towards the right, we need to really understand what are the risks. Yes, we can get our HR specialists. We're not going to mandate them that they have to come into the office 4 days a week or 3 days a week, but it's about how do we mitigate some of those risks? Or is there a better fit if they want to have that kind of role where they can do more of their skills and more of their work remotely? So I'm just going to open up the talk for sort of questions in about 5 minutes. So please do have your questions. Please do put them in the chat. I'll pick them up in just a minute. But essentially, I want to talk a little bit beyond just, returning to work and hybrid working and so on, because I think really once we understand Remoteability, what it does is it gives us a real competitive advantage, right? If you think about location strategies, if your company is going completely remote, fantastic, you can now recruit from anywhere, as long as obviously payroll and legal need to be compliant, but it unlocks a huge amount of opportunities. But then you need to understand the threat, and actually we can be a little bit smarter once we have Remoteability to understand, well, actually which area of our business are better suited for remote working, which areas of our business are much better suited to be in person, having those face-to-face conversations and building those really strong relationships. Another really interesting way to look at it is succession planning, right? We think about, we worry about our bench strength, especially in a global organization. But once we understand Remoteability, we don't necessarily have to look at, okay, who is the successor for this role, this key role within Italy or Spain or Mexico? If we understand Remoteability, we know, well, actually, okay, we want to have our, I don't know, head of this or director of that within the market. But in terms of succession and in terms of mitigating risk, we can potentially leverage if we've got great bench strength in Germany or Netherlands, we can mitigate that risk of that employee leaving by resourcing, because actually that person in that role can be doing that remotely. The other thing that's really impactful, I think, for me is around diversity. A common, Philip Morris is a large international organization. When we succession plan and when we talent plan, we often move people around the globe. So from headquarters, then moving out to specific markets, doing specific roles to really get a good understanding of the organization. That is not something that is necessarily easy if you potentially have a disability, or potentially if you have a family that you're not prepared to move, if you have care requirements. So again, Remoteability is an interesting lens to look at diversity and equality, because if we're having certain issues in terms of succession planning, what we can do is start thinking about, well, okay, what are the career paths that we need to move? What's the knowledge that you need to gain and develop as you move through the organization? But can we target roles that actually can be done mostly remotely, so that actually you're only traveling 2-3 days a week or even less, or you're doing a role fully remotely, so you're getting the knowledge, you're getting the understanding that you need to do, and you're getting that professional development to progress you through the organization. But we're taking tracks that are more suited to your personal circumstances, which unfortunately is usually much more prevalent problem for primary carers and for females and employees with disabilities. And I guess the last thing that we're looking at, and I think there's a really powerful use case for this, is especially around employee relations. Okay, again, a global organization or a regional organization, you're going to dial up demand for skills and headcount in certain areas, then you're going to dial it down in certain other areas. Okay, rather than doing this kind of hire and fire, redundancies and rehiring, offshoring, outsourcing, all our kind of roles and skills and processes. When we do those actions, when we think about closing down certain functions, can we redistribute those skills to other areas, other geographical locations, or other roles within the organization? And that's where both the task taxonomy comes in. How many of these tasks could be done in a different location where maybe we're dialing up demand, but also that skill taxonomy that just touched on. Actually, do they have the similar skills to transfer across to a more remotable role? So there's just some kind of uses of Remoteability. And like I said, it can be done very basically through Excel, through sending out spreadsheets, maybe just focusing on certain roles that we know are high risk. We can take the data analytics geeky version and get all the algorithms and all the data and process stuff, or we can go to third parties. And again, if you'd like recommendations or you'd like to discuss that as well, more than happy, please do reach out on LinkedIn or ask questions in the chat right now. But I really do believe this is an incredibly important metric, because essentially we're all trying to chase competitive advantage. Yes, the pandemic has been incredibly tough on workforces, on certain sectors, especially certain demographics. But actually, if we really understand, when we start reopening and rehiring and we start filling in these needs, we need to understand both the opportunities that this new workplace is providing, but also some of the threats and risks. And if we can really tailor that to different roles and understand what are the risks and what are the opportunities within our organization based on how we work and what we need and what the norms are in our company, then that gives us a much better competitive advantage to really maximize productivity and minimize the risks. So yeah, please do. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I see there's a few questions in the chat. So let me read Daniel. So you mentioned certain companies can help in this space. Do you have a suggested free tools we can leverage and other things we can do to work with our HRIS team to track some of this info? Yeah, so I think free tools for the skills inference, we actually use MZ, and they can drive. You can just throw in a job description or a job advert or objectives. Obviously, don't make sure you put in anything that is too sensitive. But essentially, yeah, they will do the skills inference anyway. So you can do this on the skill level. So I think task works better, but MZ is a free product that you can look at the skills. You can very quickly build a very interesting skills taxonomy that then you just go through and say, well, actually, of these skills, data analysis is probably something you can do at home. Stakeholder management, yes, it's a skill, but you need to do in person, and then look at that split. And that's a kind of a more basic way of doing it. Otherwise, my advice would be really focus on critical roles. And my background is in workforce planning, and essentially the way that we always look at critical roles is uniqueness versus strategic impact. And really looking at those top right roles and understanding what are the key roles, uniqueness, what's hard to source, and your talent acquisition team will know exactly what's hard to resource. Otherwise, Talent Neuron and other tools will kind of give you the data that you need to kind of understand supply and demand. And then the impact is really around what gives you competitive advantage, especially what's going to give you competitive advantage in the future. So I definitely say if you want to start at those critical roles, make sure that the work you're doing, even if you have to do it on Excel, is really impacting key strategic roles. And suddenly, it might be your really unique roles that are hard to recruit is because you're looking in a very defined catchment area, whether it's, data engineers in Silicon Valley, right? Huge amount of demand. Suddenly you can understand, well, actually, if all the tasks and skills they can be done remotely, that's an area of the business that you can outsource. And then that's the area of the business you want to focus on as a key threat, as in, okay, these are critical to our startup or whatever company you have out there. And then you can really make sure that the mitigations you're putting in are going to make sure that you're not losing engagement and people aren't getting disconnected, especially in such a critical role. So that would be my advice is there are some free tools, but definitely focus on critical roles to really drive basically the most impact you can from this work. From Joyce, it's interesting that most roles are in the low risk category. And thank you for the feedback. Yeah, I mean, it very much varies on your organization, right? Philip Morris, there's a lot of roles that we are doing in terms of data analytics and R&D that are potentially able to do remotely, but actually, I think if you look at the labels, we do all our manufacturing in-house. So it's really key for me. I think, these articles around, IBM is saying Facebook is saying work from anywhere, and this company is saying, no, you need to be back in the office. They're not particularly useful, right? Because it's really got to be about your organization, about what people are doing, where the road is, but also what are the risks, right? And like I said, there are delivery stars company where literally it's just what you do. If you're an IT company and it's all about creating product and improvements, and then actually you can work remotely. If you're a relational organization where it's really about collaboration and working with different areas and making sure that everyone's aligned, there's a real risk. It's really difficult to do that remotely, and also there's a real risk. I think one of the things I did mention is that the research kind of shows that yes, you can work remotely very effectively, and remote teams can work, but one of the key drivers of whether that team is going to be successful or not is whether the initial interactions are meaningful and in depth, right? So if I can build a really strong relationship with my team, once we separate, go remote, it's not a huge issue. If I can hire someone, but I can really engage them, interact, and we have a really strong connection early on, that means we can do the digital, talking on chats and stuff. It doesn't matter. The problem is when we don't really engage new hires, and then actually they never get that connection, or they just have this kind of 15-minute dry stand-up every day to talk to their team. So it's really you really want to alter your analysis and your recommendations to what the company is going to do and what is the culture of the company. And I think analytics can really help drive that, even if it's just getting some general data to start that conversation, to anchor that conversation, say, look, we think your area, most of you are going to need to work 1 day a week. And actually, if you don't, you get a risk engagement. You're just starting that conversation with data. And that's where we can have meaningful conversations about what is right for your company. Brilliant. Last call for any questions. I know we're running a little low on time. Would love to hear anything else. I'll give you another kind of 30 seconds or so if you want to put anything into the chat. But I think as well, if you're not currently working, or you don't have a people analytics team, especially if you're a small organization, I think these are all fairly simple things to do for a data science teams as well. So don't feel that you can't do anything if you don't have any. I think these are all quite short and quite doable and quite simple projects for for an IT team, or if you have those skills within the organization, to then kind of get those resources for a short time to just do a very quick piece of work, get your starting data together, and actually kind of start putting down those markers of which are the areas that we maybe think need to be working remotely, which are areas that we might want to be working from home, and at least open up those conversations. But I think that's the key is we really want to drive better conversations within the business, or we want to enable the business to make better decisions around, what is good for us, what's going to be effective, and what do we need to be thinking about as we open up, as we move into this new hybrid world of working. And I think, if we can bring data to that conversation, then actually we're really doing a fantastic job as an HR or P&C function. And yeah, if you want any advice, you start down this road and you would like to discuss and talk, more than happy, please do, find me on LinkedIn, message me. I've always got 15 minutes, 20 minutes to catch up with you. Or even if you're starting to talk with some of your HR data analysts and want some tips and pointers, more than happy if you reach out and more than happy to share the knowledge and also share some of the things that really didn't work and did work for us. So, question, please share my LinkedIn page. I think there's, I will put it in the chat. Let me find it. But yeah, I will put it now. I think I have a profile on hr.com as well. So you'll be able to find me there, but let me quickly, being on there. I will find my LinkedIn and put the link in the chat. So yes, so please do add me. Please do reach out. Would love to talk some more. And then where is the chat? There we go. Cool. So yeah, my LinkedIn is in the chat. Please do add me. Always love speaking about this stuff. Always love sharing my knowledge and would love to hear your feedback. And yeah, please do add me, and looking forward to talking to you in the future. Thanks for your questions, and I will throw it back to Kathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I would like to thank our presenter, Tim Peffers, for presenting this very informative webcast today. To the audience, your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment and fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen. You do have a few minutes before the next webcast begin, so take a visit to the exhibit hall and visit some booths. We will be sending out an email with the credit information. You will also find the credits on your View My Credits page of your membership profile once the webcast has been archived. This concludes our webcast session. We hope you've been enjoying Inspire 2021. All the virtual booths are available for the entire event, as well as the networking lounge. So please take some time, look around, and connect with others. Have a great day, everyone.